Well, several people have been killed in Russian missile strikes across Ukraine. The attacks come as fierce fighting continues for control of Bakhmut. During an interview with CNN yesterday, Ukraine's President Zelensky explained why it was necessary for defenses in the key eastern city to hold.
We understand that after Bakhmut, they could go further. They could go to Kramatorsk, to Slavyansk. And it would be an open road for the Russians after Bakhmut to other towns in Ukraine in the Donetsk direction.
Well, CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is in Ukraine following the latest and joins us now. Imtiaz, I'm glad to see you. It was, as I understand, it was a pretty scary night, across Ukraine.
Indeed. Anne-Marie, good to talk to you. Well, this was the most punishing Russian drone and missile attack in nearly a month. But it's really in Bakhmut where the situation is getting very bad, as Russian forces say they've managed to push forward in that besieged town.
In a blistering assault, a battery of Russian missiles and drones struck several major cities. Little was spared and lives lost as millions more were plunged into the cold and dark.
It doesn't make sense to me how this can happen in the 21st century, this resident says. It's like we're being attacked by wild people, just savages.
All winter, the Kremlin has ruthlessly been targeting Ukraine's infrastructure in missile and drone attacks. But it's in Bakhmut where the fighting remains the most intense. The head of the Russian mercenary group Wagner is claiming his fighters have captured key urban areas after 7 grinding months of running street battles, as the Kremlin continues to desperately pursue its first major territorial gain in over half a year. In Chasiv Yar, only a few miles away, we met Badya, who just returned from the front. It's tough, he says, really hard. There are losses, but we can't win without that. Losses felt no more acutely than at the funeral of 29-year-old medic Yama Ryklitska, who was killed treating injured soldiers in a field hospital outside Bakhmut. Her mother cries in anguish, "Oh, Yana, my baby, my little one," as she says her final goodbye.
Now, as Ukrainians continue to pay the ultimate price, as we heard from President Zelensky, he's determined to keep defending Bakhmut, no matter the cost. Anne-Marie.
Imtiaz, that was really difficult to listen to and watch, but I think it's really important to remind people that when we talk about numbers, these numbers are lives, and every life lost has an impact on an innumerable number of other lives. So it's a good reminder. You were in Dnipro. I mean, the backdrop there, it looks like it seems to have fared better than other cities, though I know there were strikes there as well. What have you been seeing?
Anne-Marie, you're absolutely right. I mean, this war, of course, has touched every life here in Ukraine and in Dnipro, which was targeted in that missile and drone attack. People are out on the streets. Why? Because they're determined to keep living their lives no matter what. That strength and defiance, which inspired so many people around the world at the start of this war, is still in place. And that's what you're seeing here. But the threat remains very real as Russia continues to punish this country. Anne-Marie.
Zelensky has spoken about the importance of Bakhmut. Does he have support for directing more resources into holding on to the city? I think it's really interesting. I heard what he said about the importance of hanging on to Bakhmut. I also thought, the Russians are losing a lot. They're using a lot of their weaponry. They're losing their men. And I wondered if part of this is also just dragging out that fight because it's depleting Russia.
Yeah, it's a really astute observation. Here on the ground in Ukraine, you'll very rarely find a person who says that Ukraine should pull out of Bakhmut. They want to keep defending that town and to ensure that Russia doesn't take this city, a city which Russia has been fighting for 7 months. But as you rightly point out, there are others, and that includes other countries, including the U.S. and the U.K., where we've heard from senior military officials who say, hey, Ukraine, this fight isn't worth it. Bakhmut isn't worth what you're losing. But from the Ukrainian calculus, it's very much like you say. They see Russia basically spending weapons, men, everything they can to seize this town. And what they hope is that it's going to exhaust ammunition. It's going to exhaust their military reserves. But Western military officials are saying Ukraine is doing that to themselves as well. And if there is going to be a spring offensive, which many are warning, that Ukraine will need to have as many men, as many soldiers, as much weaponry as possible. And perhaps Bakhmut is not the place to spend all of that. But still, as we've been hearing from President Zelensky, they remain defiant and determined to defend that city.
Yes,
Anne-Marie.
yes, they do. Imtiaz, thank you very much.